Mr. Speaker, I'm rising tonight to address the important topic also confronting this Congress and our American citizens, and that's the continued U.S. financial support for the free country of Ukraine. I say financial support because U.S. citizens overwhelmingly oppose Putin and his illegal, murderous invasion of his sovereign neighbor. Also overwhelmingly, Americans believe that our continued support of Ukraine is an imperative to stop Russian aggression. Further, Americans believe that Putin poses a threat to our own interests and that withdrawing our support would be a sign of weakness to our allies. But with that said, and large federal budget deficits of over $33 trillion in debt, along with pressing needs here at home, some Americans question continued financial support, or more specifically, what is the strategy tied to our economic support? I will outline why it's in America's interest to support Ukraine in its powerful, committed fight to eject Putin from its unprovoked, illegal invasion of their sovereign nation. I'll also work to clear up misconceptions or even myths about our current and past level of support for military, security assistance, humanitarian aid, and direct financial support to the government of Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, it's long-standing U.S. policy as a founding member of NATO and the indispensable partner in the transatlantic military, diplomatic, and economic alliance to support a peaceful Europe, safe from external threat from invasion or nuclear attack. Formally, since World War II, we have performed this multi-pronged mission against the Soviet Union, non-state and state sponsors of terrorism, during the collapse of Yugoslavia in the 1990s, and even more recently from Putin's previous illegal incursion into the country of Georgia. In 1985, some 40 years ago, President Reagan addressed the UN General Assembly and he asked the rhetorical question, what kind of people will you be 40 years from today? His hopeful answer, free people, whose government rests on the consent of the governed and who do not wage war against their neighbors. Sadly, Reagan's hopeful prediction remains untrue 4 decades later. And frankly, just as in 1985, still at the hands of the Russian leader. But for me, President Kennedy's inaugural charge perhaps said it best. Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe to assure the survival and success of liberty. This much we pledge and more. Under President Obama, despite promises made by the United States to Ukraine in the 1990s, America failed to live up to President Kennedy's pledge. Instead, President Obama pursued appeasement of Russia in Syria and Ukraine, fully tempting the megalomaniac Vladimir Putin. This wrong-headed approach was partially reversed by President Trump, but the damage, Mr. Speaker, was done. And President Biden's catastrophic decision to precipitously pull out of Afghanistan, Putin took as the final failure of American policy resolve. My friends, this matters because aside from past obligations or the moral case, U.S. workers, U.S. farmers, and U.S. consumers are better off when Europe is prosperous and free. More choices on our shelves at better prices, more jobs producing goods and exporting them, more jobs from billions of dollars of European investment here at home in the United States. Every day I hear, hey, Europe is not paying their fair share to boot Putin out. They're not paying their fair share in military equipment, supplies, humanitarian aid, the monthly budget in Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, this is a false assertion. Let's look at the facts. Since February of 2022, the European Union and the countries of Europe have contributed $32 billion in security assistance. The United States is the world's largest military superpower, with the largest industrial base, with the largest military inventories, has contributed $44 billion in security assistance. Additionally, we've increased defense production here at home, spending close to $20 billion on new inventories of supplies that we need and improvements in our industrial base. With the opening of new facilities and second and third shifts, we're adding new career opportunities from Vermont to Arkansas to Arizona. American workers are manufacturing ammunition, javelins, Stingers, Patriots, and HIMARS. On the non-security aid side of humanitarian and economic support, Europe's contributions dwarf those of the United States. Europe has contributed $42 billion for humanitarian and economic support versus $26 billion from the United States. The European Union has provided $18 billion in support for Ukrainian refugees, in addition to taking care of those 4 million people from Ukraine registered as refugees and living outside their country in Europe. Each month, it costs over $7 billion per month to man the Ukrainian government, civil and military. So far, American taxpayers have contributed $22 billion in that direct budget support. Europeans have contributed $26.5 billion and have approved by legislation $54 billion more 2024 to 2027. The World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, are in full support, and like America, they too have been generous, with several countries using these institutions to guarantee billions of dollars in loans to Ukraine. And in addition to the United States and those countries in Europe, others are helping on their own. Canada, $4.8 billion. Japan pledging $5.5 billion in assistance. We need more global leaders like Japan and Canada. So the United States is doing what we do best, using our military-industrial base, the best military in the world, to provide more security and more training assistance to Ukraine than our allies. And that's true when you take into all the contributions to this critical cause: security, humanitarian, and direct economic support. But it's clear, Mr. Speaker, that the U.S. is not alone in this effort and is surpassed by financial commitments from the countries of Europe, as it should be. The numbers speak for themselves. 2 weeks ago, I traveled to Poland to meet with U.S. commanders overseeing the training of Ukrainians and coordinating critical military supplies. I followed up by traveling to Kyiv and met with President Zelensky and his foreign minister, his finance minister, and his defense minister. Contrary to the myths I read in the U.S. press, the United States and our allies are not delivering pallets of cash or giving crypto to Ukrainian oligarchs. All the U.S. assistance is monitored and audited. The World Bank and the Deloitte CPA firm fly-spec every transfer to the Ukrainian budget or humanitarian causes, and the Department of Defense does that precisely the same for security assistance. U.S. budget support is done on a reimbursable basis, meaning that the funds are only distributed to Ukraine following the World Bank's verification the money was spent on an approved activity. The U.S. government also has the Ukraine Oversight Working Group, which consists of more than 20 agencies led by the inspectors general from DOD, state, and USAID. Now, there's some in America that spread conspiracy theories about this brutal war or even peddle Russian propaganda. Others are simply pacifists or isolationists. And Mr. Speaker, I fully respect my fellow citizens and their differing views from my own, but my friends, the past Obama appeasement or current isolationism does not make America safer or richer. Failing to see Putin's megalomania stopped in Ukraine weakens our long-term economic prospects, just like appeasing the Germans did in the 1930s. It increases the chance that our young men and women will have to respond to conflict on a battlefield. For if Russia wins, Moldova is next, the rest of Georgia, the Baltic states, and heaven forbid, Mr. Speaker, if the Chinese dictator Xi views our vacillation as his Afghanistan moment and attacks Taiwan, we will enter a global war and an economic depression. For literally less than what America spends in 1 week, we can witness the unity and security of Europe and the weakening of the Russian threat to its neighbors and deter Xi in his South China Sea provocations. But missing in all this is a lack of leadership from President Biden. He has slow-rolled badly needed equipment to the Ukrainians. And I do not yet see a strong U.S. leadership ensuring that Ukraine has a realistic strategic plan to defeat Putin and do so promptly and effectively. And I do not see full U.S. leadership sufficient to the task of choking off the Russian economy. It's down, but it's not out. And while our allies in NATO and the EU increase their defense spending and have rapidly diversified their sources of energy, we cannot let up and delay. We need to broaden and tighten sanctions, and we need to wake up. House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Michael McCaul and I collaborated last week on his Repo for Ukrainians Act, which was marked up and passed out of the Foreign Affairs Committee. This legislation included key provisions from my Ukraine reconstruction legislation, which carefully takes title to all Russian sovereign assets in other countries, collectively pools these funds for filling the budget gap and helping in the reconstruction of Ukraine. Importantly, this bill uses Russian funds, not American taxpayer resources, to aid Ukraine. It's critical that this legislation comes to the House floor and becomes one step closer to becoming law. Failure here, Mr. Speaker, means a more costly and horrific future. Let's heed President Kennedy's pledge of nearly 6 decades ago. By word and by deed, with time and treasure, let every nation know that America and her global allies will bear any burden, meet any hardship, oppose any foe, support our friend Ukraine in their support of liberty.